Thank you for joining us. I'm Cheryl Ongdarshan from Alpha JWC. So I was telling this panel earlier on that we're going to have a tough job because this is a post-lunch panel session, but we'll do our best, right, gentlemen? Yeah? So we heard a lot today about the might of the ASEAN talent pool. We've seen some investable projects presentation. And also, we discussed saying that sometimes, there were some articles going around saying also that maybe ASEAN is the next Silicon Valley. So Jonathan and Robert and Yoshiki-san, would you like to share a little bit more on that?
Well, it's a quick start. Well, yes, it's a bright future. Actually, it proves that ASEAN has been a big success. We all know that ASEAN now is the engine of the global economic growth. And why was it possible? Because this is the thing, we had lots of investment to ASEAN countries from all over the world. Why was it possible? Because every country did their best in the sense they wanted to have a good environment for global growth, and that succeeded. You gave numbers, and I can tell you that in the past 20 years, compared to 20 years ago, the amount of global investment to this region is 9 times more than 20 years before. And as all of you know, that ASEAN is the region where that takes most of the global investment compared to other regions. But if you look at after the COVID, there are some problems. For example, the new greenfield investment projects, they are decreasing. So yes, you have done a lot in regulatory reforms, but you still have some more to do. And if you look at countries, some countries did better, some countries were not so good. Vietnam was good, some countries was not good. So it is very important that we must continue doing this environment on global investment to be, in a way, similar to each other, so that every country can choose within ASEAN countries where they want to invest. So a great step in the past, and we expect a great step forward in the future. Thank you very much.
Robert, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me. I think I have been in this ASEAN circuit for actually very long, and have invested all over ASEAN. So, and one of the things I feel, I think in terms of timing, I think this is a very right time for us to really push this agenda forward and make ASEAN an even more exciting destination for investment, for global investments. So in what I do, I'm actually in the logistics and supply chain space. So we invest in smart logistics infrastructure, basically looking at how we can do a little bit of this, not just investment for money. Money is very important. I mean, we cannot be not profitable and still be doing it. But most important, with a purpose, right? So the purpose of how do we actually look at promoting inclusivity? How about looking at things like sustainability and so on? That is actually in the way that when we invest. So while we invest, we actually bring everybody forward. In this business of ours, actually what's very important is that we felt that one of the big things in ASEAN, especially, where countries grow, there are always a lot of growing pains. So the growing pains are in the area of congestion. We all witness a lot of traffic congestions, pollution, and all the associated factors, right? Because of the way that when the ASEAN countries grow, there was not enough pre-thinking or pre-planning or even expectation that it's going to be growing so fast. So I think that has created a lot of bottlenecks. So we have invested a case example in Superport in Vietnam. So Vietnam Superport is one of ASEAN legacy project, which we call Smart Growth Connect. The idea is to put in a super infrastructure, all right, logistics, smart infrastructure, which is actually part of the ASEAN Smart Logistics Network, to be able to allow countries. So this first one is actually in Vietnam, and Vietnam is very right because of the timing of this shift in supply chain from China due to tension between China and US. So a lot of a shift of supply chain actually moved in majority to Vietnam. Vietnam is a big beneficiary of that. Of course, there are also spillover to to other countries in Indonesia, Philippines, and so on. So when you look at that, all right, the idea of putting in a logistic infrastructure to allow Vietnam to be able to secure its position and take off in a lesser painful way in this growth, so that it doesn't grow with the kind of growing pain. So this is very, very important. At the same time, we're also looking at how to take that through. This is not just a Vietnam project, it's actually an ASEAN legacy project, right, which the ASEAN BAC, or Business Advisory Council, has launched in the year 2018. So we are already, right, the first phase of that project is already operational. Smart Logistics, ASEAN Smart Logistics Network is already operational in Hanoi, in the Vinh Phuc province. So this is something that's very exciting. The next stage will be Cambodia and Indonesia and so on. The idea is to create what we call interconnected supply chain hub, right, to allow anyone to use ASEAN as a production base, ASEAN as a market, right? So the basic ingredients are we must be able to lower logistics costs and reach to the global market. So this is something that we are doing. And I find that ASEAN is in the right time for this kind of a infrastructure development. And at the same time, it's all very important because of the talent, which we spoke in the last session earlier on about talent. So talent is very important. How do we actually build the talent to be able to spur and grow with this kind of initiative? Thank you.
Very briefly, it's a topic close to my heart. I used to invest in startups. I now work for the UN. It's a story for another time. But you know, I've worked around the world, and in Africa they'll be saying, "Oh, Kenya is the next Silicon Savannah." You know, my family's from Shenzhen, China. They will claim to be the next Silicon Valley.
Yes.
So, on your question around whether ASEAN could be the next startup capital of the world and or region of the world, I think the point I would note is the importance of the ASEAN as a community. If you look at some of the biggest kind of tech startups, unicorns that have grown in the world, they've grown because they can first scale in a homogeneous market. So US, huge market, China, Alibaba, huge market. You know, and I think it's really important that the ASEAN has that, you know, that commonality in policy, both be it education, be it how we do business, to allow the startups in ASEAN to have that chance to actually scale in the same way that other startups are scaled in kind of other economies who are now the unicorns. So I think that's really important. And I also think does ASEAN want to be the next Silicon Valley? You know, I think whatever ASEAN becomes in terms of the startup community must be ingrained in the context, the culture and values of ASEAN. So actually, I would say maybe ASEAN doesn't want to be the next Silicon Valley, but we can be, when I say we, sorry, I have roots in the region, but I speak on behalf of the UN, so I'll correct myself there. I think we can be a different version of Silicon Valley, and again, promote startups in a different way.
I like that. I like that, the suggestion that we could be another version, right? We don't have to follow what's been set. So just on that, then going on attractiveness, we know that ASEAN is an attractive region for investment, right? Because according to an ASEAN Council, a joint report between the ASEAN Council and the UN, ASEAN is only second to China in terms of FDI, right? And to show that, actually, there has been a 42% increment in FDI since 2019. My question on this is to Jonathan, Tony, and Wayne. How do you foresee that to continue? And also, what do you think global investors are looking at in terms of growth, emerging sectors, or maybe some markets? Don't be shy.
I can go first. Sure, absolutely. I mean, ASEAN is probably the fastest growing region in the planet with demographics that are attracting a lot of investment. I would go back even further than 2019. You have upwards of approximately 800 million people, about 50% under the age of 30. A lot of increase in consumption and wealth being generated, growth. So all those sectors that target that, consumer businesses, food, agribusiness, logistics, has stood to benefit from that. But I'd like to differentiate investment, because you have investment by companies in growing their businesses, and then you have pure financial investment. And I think companies that have a longer-term view or do take a longer-term view and invest in the region for distribution, for access, for brands, that is continuing to develop. But I think in terms of pure financial capital, it's actually quite a challenging time to attract that into ASEAN. We have a lot of volatility around interest rates, around geopolitics, energy, and you also have a very big competition, particularly in the United States and Europe, on government subsidies to encourage investment back home. So in order to, ASEAN really needs to not only show that, hey, there are opportunities here, but they have to make it easy for investors and manage the perception of additional risk versus putting that capital into a home market and compete on that. But I think luckily the macro environment and demographics are there, and you will continue to see those outflows or those inflows into ASEAN. And I might also add Singapore. Tremendous amount of money has flowed into Singapore from all over. But the question I have is also, is that being deployed, or is it just becoming a depository for wealth in a safe haven? Because what we don't want to see is that money coming in and just sitting there. We want to make sure that it gets deployed, particularly within ASEAN and the region. So opportunity, but I think a little bit of a cloudy future in the short term.
Does anyone have a different weather forecast?
The weather in Singapore is very predictable, though.
So, if I may add to that, first, we talk about this, yesterday event, in this morning event, there's so many speakers mentioning about the total foreign direct investment to ASEAN is like $224 billion US dollars, and, the economic growth of the average of the ASEAN countries is 5.6%. And also there's some other factors. The 700 million market is there in ASEAN and all that kind of stuff. But I will look at it from the investor point of view. What investor needs is basically, first of all, is stability. That's how I see it. Stability, political stability, security of the area, security stability. And then it comes with the economic growth of the countries, right? The stable economic growth, and then the other macroeconomic factors as well. So if you ask how the investor view about ASEAN, yes, it is a big market and the proximity to the bigger market as well, right? Compared to, sorry to say, but Europe and US, they have also big market, but the Asia market is huge, like with China, India, and the other countries. So ASEAN has a very good advantage in its location and all the stability that is being provided. The question is that enough or not? Maybe it's not enough. $224 billion. Is it big or is it small? Yes, there's a growth of that, right? You mentioned about so many percent growth compared to 2019. And from last year, it grew like 5%. But how much money are there in the world? How much money available for investment? Like 20 trillion or 30 trillion US dollars maybe. So 224 billion is not that big. There's a potential to become bigger if the ASEAN countries do their homework, like infrastructure, the more stable politically and security as well, the red tapes, the tax break, incentives, and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, after the political stability and security stability, investors would like to know the bottom line is that how much money I'm going to make. Otherwise, because investment doesn't have a passport, it can go anywhere. It can easily go. But the thing is that whatever investment is made, it has to be a real investment. We expect not to have just like a portfolio investment. Like what my colleague said just now is that not only that, because it can fly right away after that. But if it's a real investment, then it will have an advantage for the people as well, right? The societal advantage. That kind of investment that we need, the quality investment.
I mean, just to give it maybe a different perspective on this, questions of markets and sectors for global investors. Firstly, I'm a big advocate for when there's public and private alignment of strategy. And I think we heard yesterday 3 specific sectors. I think it was, renewables, EV, and healthcare, which is something the ASEAN member states have focused on. So they will be around the sectors. Around potential markets and other areas, I think everyone talks about digital. And we all talk about digital. And as we all know, during the pandemic, our kids went to school online. We were all on Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. And we can't imagine what our lives would have been like if we didn't have access to the digital world. And I think a really striking statistic going beyond ASEAN is that in the Asia-Pacific region, there are over 4 billion people. Over 2 billion don't have access to the digital world. And that is striking for me. And I think as a global investor, and having invested in the past before I joined the UN, I don't think we should see this as like a development challenge, as the UN would describe it. It's a business opportunity. If 2 billion people don't have access to the internet, business opportunity. And one other point I would raise, I'm not going to call it a sector, is investing in women. And we did some analysis, and we do a lot of work around gender equality, particularly around investing. And our estimation is that in the Asia-Pacific region, investing for women's equality could add up to $4.5 billion, or 12% of GDP, to Asia-Pacific by 2025. And with all the countries facing economic slump post-pandemic, I don't think women are a dividend that any country can miss. And again, this is not a gender equality issue. It makes business sense to invest in women. And it's not lost on me, Cheryl, apart from you. You're sat with a group of men here, and this is not symptomatic of this panel. I've seen it upstairs, I've seen it at other events, and I think that's a challenge to us all, really, be it the private sector, the governments in Asia-Pacific, the UN, to actually address that change and unlock the potential of actually gender lens investing and investing in women. Thank you.
I like that you pointed that out. But then with that, I'd like to segue into the next question, which is then, since we're talking about challenges and opportunities, is there anything that Yoshiki-san and Robert and Wayne, you would like to add on what are the challenges really? Because I'm seeing this as half full, but it seems like there's some glass half empty.
Yeah, I think anything worthwhile to do, there are always challenges. So you look at half full, I look at half empty. I think it's it's a bit of a dichotomy. What I feel is that I think there are more challenges, more opportunities than challenges. The challenges has been there all the time, and challenges are improving, meaning it's better. It's not worse. If you look at ASEAN 10 years ago, I think you would not imagine the kind of progress that's been made over the years. Investments in land, especially. When you invest in land, you normally need quite a number of approvals. You need also the local partnership. So one of the challenges is how to find a good local partner that can also be partnering you for a long term. One of my colleagues spoke just now on this case about investing in something that is more long term, investing something real. So investing in something that can be symbiotic with the country. All right, so you grow with the company, with the country as you grow. I think these are very important things. So things like infrastructure, things like how do you actually look at improving lives of the people, how you bring talent, development, digitalization, IT, and so on to move up basically the people that you need to employ and train so that they can man those infrastructure in the long term. I think these are very important initiatives that I find will continue to be opportunities, right, rather than challenges. Right? The challenge is that it's not available now. Not enough is available now. So on the flip side, it's an opportunity. So we can actually put in our effort and bring these people up. I think that's the idea. And the big challenges in ASEAN today is many countries have very high logistics costs. So the logistics kind of a connectivity, which is not as connected as what we would like, is affecting the way that ASEAN can progress, right, in this part of the global value chain. So I think very important to tackle the root. That's why we are actually fighting it right at the heart of the problem to see how we can tackle this by creating smart logistics infrastructure to plug ASEAN into the global value chain, right? So by doing that, we hope to bring down logistics costs. We hope to improve time to market, so more manufacturing can be happening in this part of the world, and that will spur consumption and allow the ASEAN economic story to continue. Thank you.
Yoshiki-san?
Well, thank you very much. What are the challenges? Well, actually,
Opportunities or challenges?
Eh?
Opportunities, challenges?
Opportunities. Yes, challenges are opportunities. Opportunities provide challenges. But in any case, OECD is known for what we are doing our best is trying to have better policies for better lives. So, do this FDI provides better lives for your people? That is the basic question. Yes, we have succeeded in ASEAN region, but we need to think more about value creation, and sustainable development. Is the FDI helping green? Is the FDI helping sustainable economy? That is the basic question, and that is the challenge. And for example, ASEAN countries, we had some discussion in the other sessions that we are now facing climate change, right? So we are the region that we need to deal with the climate change. But is the FDI helping climate change? Is the FDI helping the green economy? That is the challenge I see. Because if you look at the numbers, the CO2 emission per unit of output, compare it between foreign investment and domestic investment. You might think that foreign investment are more energy conscious. It might not, it's not always the case. Better do something with it. So there are some kind of a policy, how to say, encouragement is needed in order to make sure, of course, it's the money, it's the, how to say, wages, but at the same time, better lives, the FDI is costing better lives. I think that is the challenge and opportunity. Thank you very much.
I would say the glass is half full, not half empty. But certainly, I think as Robert mentioned, ASEAN has improved as an investor destination tremendously over the last couple of decades. It's not without challenges, but it's certainly the interest there. In my role as president of the CABC, we have over 70 members now of medium to large size Canadian companies that represent about 40 or so different industries. So planning events can be a little bit challenging for the team. But that just goes to show that there's a tremendous interest across many different sectors, whether it's architecture, whether it's infrastructure, logistics, consumer, food, healthcare, energy, that there are the opportunities here in the markets to go into. I think one of the challenges is probably around education. When investors look at ASEAN, they sometimes fail to realize initially it is not one big market. It is it's 10 countries within ASEAN of very different size and economic size and political and legal backgrounds. And they need to pick which countries and which industries reflect their investment thesis, and that can be pretty difficult. I do agree with Robert that the best challenge or the best thing to approach investing in ASEAN period, and particularly in emerging market ASEAN, is finding the right partner to work with, because that's what's going to protect you as an investor. And usually the local partners that you work with are very long-term investors, obviously dedicated to their home markets, and those are the types of people that you want to invest in and alongside, and can build longer-term partnerships and businesses alongside them. So yeah, I think it's a complex market, but there's definitely lots of opportunities across industries. And two of the things that come up particularly lately are really food security and energy security. Been a lot of volatility with recent events politically, geopolitically, and those have a very direct impact on the lives of people, which has been mentioned, and that is a tremendous area of potential investment to improve that for peoples of ASEAN, as well as making a good commercial, return on your investment.
So if I add to that, so I think one of the challenges is that since many of the investment is now basically on digitalization, energy transition, the healthcare and food security and others, but specifically for digitalization and also energy transition, the challenge is that I think ASEAN, we have to increase our skilled labor. So the investors would love to have to come to have the skilled labor to do the job. So this is also an opportunity for investment in education, and try to increase to make a skilled labor, vocational training, and other sectors. So I think it is very important to have a more available skilled labor in ASEAN countries.
I just want to come back to a point. I think Tony and Wayne, you mentioned that FDI is one thing. What is the impact? And Yoshiki-san actually brought up the buzzword, value creation. So I come from Alpha JWC, right? We're a VC firm. So we always believe that capital injection is just the first step, right? So we provide value creation to increase our founders' chances of success. But Yoshiki-san did also say that when it comes to FDI, how do we harness that impact? How do we make sure that impact is delivered? Anyone have any idea?
I would suggest, Jennifer, on investor, because one of the things my job in Kadin, in Indonesian Chamber of Commerce, is try to attract investment into the country. I would advise first is that the investor should try to prioritize the downstreaming. The downstreaming process means it will create more add value addition to the whatever products they're going to produce, whether it's in mining sector, in the agriculture sectors, on whatever sector, a further downstreaming will create more value. And second is that the inclusive approach. Inclusive approach means that you will have to be able to involve the community surrounding that, which are the MSMEs, basically. Inclusive approach, will have, because I believe that no company can prevail in a community that fail. So by that, in addition to that, also kind of like commitment to the green investment, right? Because the world need the green investment right now. So we have to improve ourselves, or we have to scale up in making a green investment into the country. For example, like, yesterday, Mr. Minister Bahlil mentioned about that the growth of the EV investment grew like 570%, and for the renewable energy increased 240%. Means this is also a good thing, a good sign that the green investment is also something like very attractive. And the last thing is that to structure such investment in a broad societal advantage. Like it has multiplier effect to the people, and also not only for the investor itself. But at the end of the day, it's creating value for the stakeholders.
I would say for investors, whether it's GPs like yourself and myself, the issue of impact is becoming a lot more embedded in everything that we do, because it's being driven by our LPs. You look at the pension funds, the endowments, the family offices that give fund managers the capital to invest. They are asking for requirements around sustainability, around impact on communities, gender equality as well, environment. The list goes on and on and on. And I think investors are very conscious of, and corporate investors as well are very conscious that they need to make an impact where they are investing, and it's not just about buying commodities and shipping them somewhere else for value-added processing. It's a common theme not only in ASEAN, but even in my home country of Canada, where we're known for commodities. We too have the same desire to capture more of that value chain locally. And it does require having an educated labor force. It does require, in some cases, certain government incentives or guidelines, or at least clarity of public policy with regards to whatever industry that you're in to make that happen. And so I think that is creeping more naturally into the investment sort of process than perhaps a few decades ago, just by sheer weight of all these processes driving it.
Well, thank you very much. How do you numericate the value of foreign direct investment? Very difficult. You can, of course, count the number of jobs. You can, of course, how much money came in. But, for example, a foreign direct investment, the share of women hired in the foreign direct investment is higher compared to the domestic industry. That means with the foreign direct investment, gender equality is improving. But how can you numericate that? So there are lots of difficult things. And that's the reason why OECD is promoting responsible business conduct, corporate governance, by trying to, restrict, in a sense, have a good discussion with the corporate companies, but in what way you do your business. That, in the end, will bring in the result of a higher value for the recipient countries. I think that's the one way of trying to make sure that foreign direct investment actually brings better lives for the people. Right. Thank you.
So with that then, we spoke about, talent, community and all, and even I think one of you mentioned, governments, policymakers, regulations. So, and also we know that ASEAN is one region, but 10 countries. What would you say to global investors, right? How would you advise them to look at ASEAN and different lens when it comes to investing in ASEAN?
Maybe, Wayne, you want to go first? Go ahead. Okay. So I just wanted, I've always been asked this question because diversity of ASEAN, is it an advantage or disadvantage? So a lot of people will say because of the diversity, it's very hard to organize, very hard to move together. I think that, to me, is not the correct answer. I feel that the diversity is actually an advantage because we are in different areas or different levels of investment. Development. So it's good for us to be able to harness and leverage each other, comparative advantage. So for example, in the smart logistics infrastructure that I'm talking about. So we chose Vietnam because we think Vietnam is more ready, right? Vietnam population and the opportunity of the shift from China, Vietnam is the nearest neighbor and definitely benefit, so we move in there on that basis. Then we have other investment coming in Cambodia and all the rest, depending basically on the way that we see how the waves move, right? In terms of the demand, the pending demand, and what is needed for that country to move. So we could time that and then work it out, but it's actually the same concept, but taken to 10 different countries at different time and readiness. So you read the pain points. As a businessman, we cannot be everywhere, right? We can't boil the whole ocean, but what we can do is look at what the opportunities, the pain points are there, opportunities are there. We invest, we will move into a country, and then we'll replicate and move it on to the other countries. So all together, the ASEAN region can move as a region. Right. So another one about talent is that last week I was in Hanoi. My Prime Minister, Singapore Prime Minister, went and then met up with the Vietnamese Prime Minister, basically to share the diplomatic relation, the 50th anniversary, 50 years of good diplomatic relations. So one of the things that we announced there was the fact that YCH, which is the company I represent, YCH Group, we actually went in to sign the MOU with the provincial government of Windhoek, which is one of the growing province, to train 500 logistics professionals, to train for them, 500 in Singapore. So we will actually take them in, bring them in, train them 9 months in Singapore, and allow them to move back to be able to run along those career path, right? So the entire thing is about moving and upskilling, reskilling them so that they can take this in the longer term and move. This is something that's very interesting. At the same time, about SME development. We start as a transport company. We are 68 years in the business, all right? Don't look at me. I think I'm second generation, by the way. So 68 years in business, we started a transport company. Obviously, we know how to run transport companies, but we chose that in the countries that we go in, where the ecosystem allow, we will work with the SMEs. So we have, like, even here in Indonesia, we move susu mineral all over Indonesia. We have easily 30 partners, SMEs, that work with us to deliver every day thousands of trucks across the entire Indonesia. And we do that also in Vietnam, in Malaysia, and so on. So the idea of doing that is to be able to bring everybody along with us, right? To be able to pass them the skills in running transportation company, in looking at how they can upskill their people together with us and grow together. So that's how actually we look at it from that point of view.
Tony?
So, like I mentioned earlier, I think what advice should I give? What we are talking here right now is basically the overall about the ASEAN. But when somebody wants to make an investment, before he decides, he needs to go into the detail of each country. Because, we have to understand that each country has their own regulation, has their own incentive facilities and others. So that's the first. But the utmost that, like I mentioned earlier, is that how the investment should be. I would advise the investor to, like I said earlier, to involve the local people, to involve the SMEs, so that they can stay longer there, they can go further together with the people. So that's the bottom line, in addition to all the microeconomics factor and all that kind of operational and all the technical issues that they have to face.
So we have a few more minutes left, so I just want to go back to the point that Tony made earlier to all our panelists here. How can we grab more of that pie? Because Tony said, 42% increment, sure, we could do better. So how can we do better? To grab more of that pie. Maybe we'll start with you, Tony, since you set the
Okay.
tone for that.
I mentioned earlier because ASEAN countries now are building infrastructure. But is that enough? No, we have to build more infrastructure to make the investor be more attractive to the country. We need to train our labor to scale up their loans. We need to have a much better policies, much better taxation and incentives for the investor. Because what we need is that the investor to come. It's not about taxing them in front, but the multiplier effect is the more important thing. So, and all the other necessity that we have to make is that to make all the policy more investment friendly. So I think we still have a homework we can improve that. Of course, we can improve that so that the investment will come more into the ASEAN countries.
Jonathan?
I think the guys from ASEAN can answer this much better than me, so I'm just learning from them. So I'll hand back.
Anyone of the panelists want to add on to that?
Sure. I totally agree with what you're saying. A lot of stuff comes up in dialogue with our members. There is a lot of uneven rules amongst the different ASEAN countries in terms of investment protection rules, taxation, restrictions on investment, and in many countries there's a negative list that you are forced to have majority shareholders, even though you're expected to bring all the capital and all the know-how. So I think it's improved for certain, but I think some of the a more uniform approach to some of these issues, what I think would help, particularly when you're an investor coming to look at the region and wanting to take advantage of the scale of the growth here, which is something that people would like to see. ASEAN has taken some steps. I mean, there's digital initiatives ongoing within ASEAN to have a common framework around digital transactions and issues of data privacy and all that. I'd encourage ASEAN to keep working on those and do more of that. And I think it would help attract more of that FDI.
Yoshiki-san?
Well, yes, I respect the diversity of ASEAN countries and what they can do more, because I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of the business. But I think what is very important is the transparency, predictability of the regulations. That's number one. At the same time, we should not do, race to the bottom, but we should do race to the top. In that sense, we must, for example, in the case of tax incentives, it must be well targeted. Just cutting taxes in order to invite capitals, in the end, no one will win because it's race to the bottom. But if all the countries introduce policies that, incentivizes climate-friendly policies, that is race to the top. So I think a transparent, predictable, and well-targeted policy is very needed. Thank you.
I just want to do a little bit of advertisement for ASEAN Back. I think, events like this is organized by ASEAN Back, the Business Investment Summit, is to really allow businesses also to share their pain point and allow also policymakers, that's why we invite the government in too, to be able to see the pain of basically of businesses, and at the same time, like transparency. You mentioned about transparency, so that we all know what's happening. So if you have issues that are burning in you, that you want to take it out, please engage the ASEAN Business Affairs Council, or even through your own council. We are not just among the ASEAN countries, we have ASEAN Plus, right? Canada, ASEAN, China, ASEAN, US, ASEAN, UK, ASEAN, and so on. So we have all those platforms to be able to connect. So it's very important that we also bring your pain points up so that we can then all move together. So this is not about competition, this is actually about collaboration. If the better we do together, all of us win. Right? If we go the other way around, then we are going to fight to the bottom, like what my colleague here mentioned. So I think it's very important for us to take that. This is a very interesting platform. So we hope to see you every year from now on to be more active.
And I would like to comment, if you're going to make a plug for ASEAN back, I'll make a plug for Canada ASEAN Business Council. I would say a lot of we're a private sector driven organization to represent Canadian, primarily Canadian business in this region, but also ASEAN business into Canada, which is at an increase as well. But in terms of interest in the region, right now Canada and ASEAN are actively negotiating a free trade agreement. And Canada and Indonesia are also actively negotiating a bilateral trade agreement. So I think from our perspective that putting these agreements in place, they themselves become a catalyst for increased investment and awareness of the region and the opportunity set here. So we hope to see those concluded soon, although they do take a while. But I thought I'd point that out as an example that agreements like that do act, and there's a tremendous amount of interest. I think ASEAN probably has a queue. I know the EU, the UK, others are very actively pursuing similar agreements in the region, and it's all to, again, promote business ties and as well as foreign investment to support that.
But Tony, you...
Yeah, I'd like to add to that is that, again, the regional cooperation, we need to increase the cooperation and harmonizing probably the regulation and try to make a framework, which we did already. We have the ASEAN Comprehensive Investment Agreement, but I think we can do more about that. And the idea of having the ASEAN Economic Community as well. So it has to be formalized in a more practical way so that the investor will look at that and then feel comfortable in investing in ASEAN.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, and Robert and Wayne. Thank you for the plug. You know where to find them later on if you have some questions. And I think after discussing, at the end of it, we're all seeing it as glass half full. Thank you for your time, and thank you, everyone, for staying with us.
Please give a big round of applause to all speakers and our moderator.